Yes? Ecuador. Small country in northwest South America. Really quite small considered to Colombia, Peru, or even Brazil. It's about twice the size of the UK, with around 16 million inhabitants. These are the main cities of Quito, the capital, and Guayaquil down in the south. The main regions that I visited during my trip were Napo and Pastaza, and a bit of the coastline here in Manabí. You have basically the Andes that cut the country in half, and they create this massive chain of mountains and volcanoes. Now, Ecuador is a super diverse country, not only in terms of plants and animals, but also the people that inhabit it because of the story behind it. Some of these people are the mestizos, so descendants of what would have been the Hispanics that came just after the continent was discovered. And the Montubios here, that live mainly on the coast in Guayaquil. We have the Afro-Ecuadorian community, which is based mainly upon descendants of the slaves that were brought at those times. And also the American Indians that were, sadly, till this day are still considered a bit of a caste community. They don't share much of the power, much of the political issues that are debated in the country. They rarely have access to education and live off very poor means. We have the Shuar. Now these are people that live in the Amazon basin. You might have heard of these people. As you might notice down here, you can picture what they have in their hands. Are a warrior tribe that live in the Amazon. Sunken heads. I'm not sure if any of you have ever heard of these stories. When I was a kid, my mum used to tell me about these things. It used to freak me out. The Warani people, the people of the forest, a peaceful tribe. Miranda showed us this panel earlier on. You must recognize it. With a couple of nice paintings. Now we get to my first mysterious character, number 1. Does anybody recognize this man? Come on, I've been talking about him for quite a while. Richard, you know who he is? Alexander von Humboldt, yes, that's right. Where to start with Humboldt? All of you who know me know that I could probably go on and on and on about this man who inspired me such a lot. Humboldt was born in Germany in the 18th century and traveled extensively across the world. But the first tropical area that he visited was South America. During 5 years, him and French botanist Aimé Bonpland traveled to collect thousands and thousands of plants, exploring all these regions. Humboldt was not only a scientist, he was a man of illumination. Having studied so many sciences, he inspired so many people across the world and had an influence. One of them being the young Montufar, who would lead the revolutions and free all of South America from the Spanish influence. At the end of his life, he wrote this book, Cosmos, which is simply a revision of all the sciences that he ever studied across his life to try and synthesize his understanding of the universe, just that. We have actually an original copy of this book in the archives here at CUBE. The previous owner was the first director of CUBE himself. And many things are named after Humboldt, including the Humboldt Current, which is a cold current coming from the Antarctic all the way up along the coast of South America. This hot current, the cold current, meets the hot air of El Niño and creates tremendous downfalls of rain along the coast. All this region here that we see is mainly the influence of the Humboldt current. And in the Choco Magdalena region over here, the meetings of these two currents creates downfalls of rain that reach up to 13 meters of rain per year. Can you imagine that? This creates huge diversity across these rainforests where it rains literally every day, downpours. Now here we can see a bit of the topography of the Andes, with the main mountainous regions over here. And Ecuador has over 27 different mountains and volcanoes that rise over 3,000 meters high. Quito itself, the capital, is over 3,000 meters high. And this creates huge diversity of habitats. So we can go from something very complicated like this to something a bit more simple and summarize 3 main regions that characterize the ecoregions of Ecuador, which are, on your right here, the Amazon region, on the left, the coastal region. In the middle, we have the Andean with the Interandean regions on the east and the west, and the Galapagos, which are also part of Ecuador. Time to talk a bit about the species that live there. Over 6,000 species of moths and butterflies. This is amazing. Some even say that the Guarani people would be able to tell what species of butterflies would fly at what time of the day according to the light and the humidity of the air. 1,656 species of birds. This is enormous, absolutely enormous. The bird here is the condor, which is presented on the national flag of Ecuador. Some of you might recognize the blue-footed boogies. They're endemic, or not endemic, we actually find them in a lot of islands around the Pacific, but are a symbol of the Galapagos. And this bird here, some of you might have seen before, is the hoatzin. Now, hoatzins are very prehistoric birds, but they act very much like the cows of the forest, really. They actually feed off a lot of leaves and have bacteria in their guts that will be able to dissolve the leaves. These are just numbers of other groups of animals that you will find across the region. 951 species of freshwater fish. A lot of the rivers that you will find in Ecuador will then transverse into the affluents of the Amazon. 527 species of amphibians, with over 138 endemics. We'll see later on that in Yasuni National Park we have over 150 species of amphibians in this small region, which is more than North America and, the US and Canada combined. Now we get to the plants, of course. 16,000 species of plants in such a country, more than all of Europe combined. Orchids, ferns, passifloras, arrowwoods, palms, you name it. All the major groups that are constituent of these forests are just so present in such a diversity. Now, some of the groups that I studied over there were the passion flowers and the arrowwoods. But I soon grew an interest for so many groups of plants, because everywhere you wander, you'd be amazed by the diversity. So I'll focus on a couple of groups, the palms, which struck me. Mainly the stiltroot palms here that you can find, which are quite diverse, because you can find them in lowlands, such as the Socratia, or even in the highlands, like Vitinha palms. This palm right here is actually a species that you can find in Colombia, Ceroxylum quindioense, which is the tallest palm in the world, up to 60 meters. Now we have one of those in the temperate house, don't we, Dave? Sure we do. Tagua, or vegetable ivory. Maybe some of you have seen this before. Ptylophus equatorialis, which is endemic to the western coast of the Andes. Ptylophus macrocarpia, another species that you can find in the Amazon. And another group of plants that I study here, which are the passion flowers. Now, I went with one of my friends and colleagues from Lyon Botanic Garden, where I studied before, Maxime, who now works at the CNRS of Grenoble. And as we went to look at this group of plants, we had a special interest in a section which is called Laurifolie, with about 20 species. And we were just doing a study on distribution and morphometrics. So a couple of characteristics when you look at passion flowers. Here, the operculum, the rays of corona. We have the basal part with the sepals and the petals, and also the glands. The glands are extremely important in passion flowers. You might know the maracuya, of course. Some of you might have seen this or tasted it. Absolutely delicious. And even this species, which was described not that long ago, Passiflora unipetala, the species pollinated by bats. Now, Ecuador and a lot of countries that you can visit in South America, when you see them and when you visit them, you always hear, oh, we have the biggest number of species of this, we have the biggest number of that, blah, blah, blah. Which is all good and all fair. You should be proud of it. But Ecuador, again, once it puts its mouth where its money is and rises to the challenge. In 2007, when the constitution was revised, Ecuador was the first country in the world to include the rights of nature as part of its constitution. And nature was no longer to be considered an object or something that you could just exploit out of its natural resources. It was now a living entity, representable in the face of the law, like any person. One of the second group of plants that I studied over there was the arrows. And I was lucky enough to join here Dr. Thomas Gross on an expedition which was founded by the National Geographics. Now this guy was a machine. He's like 77 years old this year. But he can still do stuff that I can't do. From 5 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock in the evening, we would get up and work. No breaks, never. This guy's been going like this for over 50 years. He's a legend. So here are some of the plants that we find in these forests. And what do we do with these plants once we've found them and we've collected them? Take a load of pictures of them for records. And then we want to press them. Now, it's not always easy to press plants in tropical environments. You know, it's hot, it's humid, especially the humidity. That doesn't really allow you to dry plants properly. But you've got to really know what you're doing when you're collecting plants, because you might miss the criteria. That's why the photos are important. They can depict colours. But also, when you want to press plants, it's important that you don't waste any space. So something like this would be pressed and then presented on a herbarium specimen like this. It doesn't really fit, does it? So you want to know how to cut it. And aroids, some of the criteria that you definitely want to consider is the sinus, so this part right here, the lobes, the petiole, and even the base of the plant, where you can see the caterpillars. So you basically start off by cutting the petiole right here. And then we know that in aroid leaves, we have a symmetric leaf, which means that we can actually get rid of one half of the leaf. You don't really need it, because all the characteristics are preserved in the other half. You want to make sure that you don't disturb the main rib here in the center, and then you get the apex of the lobes right here. And by symmetry, you can still reconstitute the sinus. Now once this is done, you get your herbarium press, and you start making sandwiches. And what is a sandwich? A sandwich is a piece of corrugate, piece of cardboard, a blotter, and finally your magazine, which you're going to conserve your specimen. So you want to make sure that the specimen is well flattened. But here again, it doesn't really fit. So you're basically going to fold it, make sure that you preserve all the criteria, don't be afraid to break it. There'll be a few parts sticking out. And reproduce exactly the same pattern on the other side. Then once we've fastened a lot of these sandwiches together, which is what we've been doing here, you see David and Tom fastening the sandwiches. You can then eat sandwiches. And you even have a sandwich. And then you put them all in these dryers. So these are really rudimentary dryers that function on gas. Gas is pretty cheap in Ecuador because they're a world producer, supplier. And some low heaters here at the bottom. So you make sure that you put all your specimens in vertically so the heat goes through them nicely and dries them out. And then by the end of it, you take them out and you stack them up and you go through the numbers, make sure they're in the right order, and store them in the herbarium for them to be described by future botanists, visiting experts, etc. Now, one of the areas that I visited, and I was very lucky, was Yasuni National Park. Now, I gave you a few numbers earlier on, and I really should have put some of the numbers up on Yasuni. The reason why I didn't is simply because this place breaks every record. Every life form that you can imagine. Amphibians, over 150 species of amphibians, many of them endemic. Reptiles, mammals, 200 species of mammals, including over 100 species of bats. It's been recorded within this place. In 1 hectare, there was up to 600 plant specimens. And in 25 hectare plots, up to 1,100 species of plants can exist. That's more than all of North America. Now, Yasuni National Park has one big problem, is that it lies on a massive sitting of oil. More than 20% of the country reserves in oil. Now, oil foraging had already started in the 90s, but they wanted to continue this foraging, and in 2007, Rafael Correa, the actual president, threw an ultimatum to the world. And as this place was a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, a worldwide heritage, he simply said, well, if this is a worldwide heritage, the world must want to preserve it. And it would be unfair for Ecuador to not benefit from Yasuni with the reserves of oil that are underneath if the world wants to preserve the site. So he put the ultimatum out there, and unfortunately didn't manage to make as much money as the project was supposed to make. So the drilling was continued. Until this day, a lot of the Wairani people who live in Yasuni National Park are threatened by oil foraging. So here are some of the pictures I'm going to show you that took place in the park. Have this weird looking thing which is actually a legume, believe it or not. Some nice bridges, rungs, and a couple of weird plant species. This, for example, is in the Cucurbitaceae family. This weird liana-looking thing is a Gesneria, believe it or not. Another legume here. Really liana. Mystery character number 2. This one's a bit more difficult, Richard. I'm not sure you'll get this one. Does anybody know who this man is? Alwyn Gentry. Now, Alwyn Gentry started his work at the Missouri Botanic Garden in the late 70s. Now, when I was talking about Tom earlier on, this guy is a level above. In less than 20 years, he collected over 80,000 specimens. That's enormous. The people that worked with him recount his stories. One of them that I really like was Scott Murray from the New York Botanic Garden, saying that they were in Peru one time, exploring the jungle, and they got lost for about 3 days, hardly any supplies, anything. And by the time they got back, they just had a quick lunch and went back out there, collecting, the same day. He even received, one other story was he received a secateurs whilst trying to get a flower up from the canopy that just landed on his head, cutting him and opening his head up. He just let the blood clot up and just continued. Now I'm going to move from the Amazon to the coast with Machalia National Park, which is the Manabí province, which is the only coastal national park in Ecuador. and holds more than 40,000 hectares of dry tropic lands. Now, I was there during the dry season, and as you can see, it's pretty brown. There's not much leaves going on. Most of the flowers have passed, although there are still some out there. But when the rain season hits, everything comes to bloom. Everything comes in leaf. And this area that seems dead in appearance just comes back to life. Here are some of the specimens that I encountered over there. I don't know if anybody recognizes this. I have no idea what it is. It kind of looks like a chrysalia or something. I don't really know. Like this coral thing sticking out pink in the middle of the bushes and shrubs. A couple of the birds that you can observe over there. So again, the blue-foot buoys with 2 babies, and it's actually quite common for one of the babies to develop over the other and take dominance, and the other one dies, unfortunately. It's a weird evolutionary trait, really. The black-headed vulture, 2 fregates here. And the fregates are really types of birds that don't actually go fishing and diving into the water. They scoop along the surface of the water and catch the birds as they're getting chased by bigger predators from underneath. Or, a lot of the time opportunistic, they'll come along the coast and try and grab the fishes from the fishermen that are along, come and bring back the morning, their morning fish from the previous night. Now this is another environment as well, the Paramo. So we're moving up, starting to get high in the mountains. This is around 3,000, 4,000 meters in height. Above this line, there's hardly any tree that grows whatsoever, except maybe one species, which is Polylepis. Maybe some of you have heard of, in the Rosaceae family. And what you see here are great big Asteraceae herbs. Espeletia. This one, for instance, they grow so slowly, this one's probably over 100 years old, easily. And a couple of the plants that we saw over there as well. My favourite, this one. This is an Aboriginaceae family. Does anybody know which family this one might belong to? Which one? This one here. Gentianaceae. Same family as these two. Weird. The creep. Yeah, guinea pigs. Now bear in mind, I'm traveling with a French colleague, and we arrived at this village. It was quite late at night, I remember. And this lovely woman offers us cuy for dinner. So the cuy in French means testicles. So me and my friend just burst out laughing, but taste them and it's quite nice actually. And I'd just like to end my talk here with the Chimborazo, tallest volcano in Ecuador. And as you might know, Earth is flattened at the poles, therefore the circumference around the equator is enlarging, which means that every summit around the equator is actually further from the center of the Earth than any other mountains. So this point here is actually further away than the Everest. It's also the closest point to the sun. And this is the mountain that Humboldt climbed about 200 years ago. I'd just like to end the talk with a couple of pictures that I took. Some of them are from my trip through Ecuador. Some of them are from my further journey, as Ecuador was just a start for me. My whole trip lasted over 11 months, going through Colombia, Central America, and the north coast of West America. But that's for another time. Thank you very much.